Flooding in China continues as the third wave is passing through the city of Chongqing. We'll also be taking an in-depth look at the structural problems with the Three Gorges Dam. And Xi Jinping sent a veiled message by visiting the Xiping Battle Memorial Hall. Welcome back, everyone. First off, some breaking news. With the ongoing floods in China, the third wave of the floods is passing through the city of Chongqing on July 27. And the water levels in the Yangtze River and the Jialing River have continued to rise. Dozens of shops were flooded in Chico ancient town, and also a landmark building was flooded in Tianmen. Also, as the CCP puts new lockdown measures into place in areas including Beijing, Xinjiang, Dalian, and Liaoning, local reports suggest mass testing sites for the virus have been chaotic. On July 26, Dalian launched a large-scale drive for nucleic acid tests for millions of people in the city. Locals on the ground said the test site was chaotic, with a large group of people gathered closely together and often without proper social distancing or proper protection. This raises existing concerns seen elsewhere in China, where mass testing sites were established, that the testing sites themselves may be helping spread the virus. Now, the testing being done in Dalian uses a method where tests from 5 people are placed in one kit. If there's no positive reaction, all 5 people are declared to not have the virus. And if there is one positive reaction among the 5, all 5 of them will be tested again. Meanwhile, in Urumqi in Xinjiang province, which is currently on lockdown, an official from the local CDC told the Epoch Times in an interview that on July 26 and 27, there were 41 and 57 new virus cases confirmed, respectively. Now, the cases were confirmed through mass testing again. Also, a video has been circulating that suggests authorities are building a makeshift hospital in Urumqi that's similar to the ones that were established during the height of the virus when hospitals were full. Now, the authenticity of that video has not yet been confirmed. In other news, in the United States, officials in 27 states, including Louisiana, Virginia, Kansas, Ohio, Washington, Kentucky, and Wyoming, have sent out alerts after residents reported receiving mysterious packages over the past few days with seed packets sent from China. Now, these seed packets have also appeared in parts of the UK. Ryan Quarles, Kentucky's agricultural commissioner, issued a statement on July 27 reminding people of the potential risks that are associated with these packages. He warned that unfamiliar seeds could be an invasive plant species and can introduce diseases that are detrimental to the local habitat and livestock. Also, in some other news on the Chinese economy, while the CCP is reporting to the West that its economy is on the rebound, and while foreign investors are again pouring money into the country, local officials are sending a very different message internally. On July 23rd, Premier Li Keqiang of the State Council of the CCP once again mentioned that the Chinese government at all levels should, quote, resolutely live a tight life, which has again brought attention to the real difficulties being faced by the CCP in its finances and economy, as China has been battered by the virus and by ongoing natural disasters. Now, in his government report in May this year, Li Keqiang mentioned the term tightening. He said that, quote, this year the central government will reduce non-urgent expenditures by more than 50%, and the local government will also tighten its budgets. Now, this year the CCP's financial revenues at all levels has fallen sharply. According to CCP's official data, in the first half of the year, central government-level public budget revenue was down by 14%, and the local government budget revenue was down by about 7.9%. In addition, national tax revenue and non-tax revenue is down by 11.3% and 8% respectively. As of July 26, among the 31 provinces that have announced their fiscal revenues, 26 provinces had fiscal revenue deficits in the first half of the year. However, the CCP still has a large budget set aside to suppress its own people. The Epoch Times recently obtained exclusive internal documents issued by the Baoding municipal government on May 20 this year, giving orders to, quote, fully protect public security, entities' public funds, and to, quote, prioritize the implementation of county-level public security entities' public funds in police stations. Now, this leaked document showed that in its 2020 budget, quote, the police force of county-level police stations will account for more than 40% of this budget. And now for the broader stories for today. Now, with concerns growing over a possible collapse of the Three Gorges Dam, where authorities have opened all the water discharge gates amid heavy flooding in China, several issues with the dam are now coming to light. Now, there were several engineering errors and design problems in the dam itself. Among these are that its hydraulic slope is calculated incorrectly, which could bring disaster in itself, that its flood control benefits are now shown to have been greatly exaggerated. Even the CCP's official narratives have been walking back some of that. And the various goals with the project have ended up contradicting one another. Now, Epoch Times interviewed Dr. Wang Wei-Lao, a well-known hydraulic expert who has extensively studied the Three Gorges Dam. And he pointed out that many of the dam's goals can't be achieved simultaneously, like the CCP attempted. Now, Dr. Wang noted that flood control and power generation conflict, flood control and shipping conflict, flood control and muddy storage and clearing conflict, and also that power generation, flood control, shipping, and irrigation conflict. Power generation and muddy drainage and shipping also conflict. And so what does he mean by this? He's basically saying the CCP tried making the dam do just about everything. And because it tried to make it do everything, its different functions end up undermining the other functions, which overall undermines the basic functions and integrity of the dam. Now, Dr. Wang Wei-Lao also noted this, quote, "It was demonstrated that the advantage of the Three Gorges Dam was that it can effectively control the downstream water volume. The current situation is just the other way around. When the downstream is dry, the dam needs to store water. When the downstream is flooded, the Three Gorges Dam needs to discharge floodwaters." Now, there are also quality issues with the dam, which are becoming more apparent. Now, the CCP strictly controls information on the quality of the dam. And so, in other words, most of the data is coming from the CCP itself. Yet this hasn't been enough to silence researchers. Among the issues are that several sections of the dam show issues of horizontal displacement. There's cracking in multiple areas, which has been attributed to the dam being constructed and inspected as multiple separate projects, rather than a single whole with standard quality. In other words, when they went and built it, they built it in sections, and each section was treated as a separate project. It is the collective of these separate projects that basically makes the dam itself. And when they inspect different parts of the dam, they inspect each section separately, not as a whole dam, not as the whole thing. And so now there are cracks showing, which apparently are among these sections. And on top of this, for example, holes that were drilled in 2002 at key parts of its 800-ton gate were never properly filled. Instead of drilling, then recasting the holes, authorities only applied a layer of chemical coating that is supposed to prevent leakage. And on top of this, there were issues with the high slope of the ship lock where cracks began appearing as far back as 2002, which could also affect the opening and closing of these ship lock gates. Now, these are just a few of the details which were explained in depth in a series of articles from the Epoch Times published in Chinese. And a few points on this. Now, the Three Gorges Dam is coming into the international spotlight as authorities have opened the floodgates amid the heavy rains and floods. Now, the CCP has been given a few difficult choices with this. The dam itself does not appear to be able to withstand the floods. They had to open these gates in order to relieve pressure on the dam itself. And what happened with this? Well, they had to choose between opening the gates and flooding different cities downstream, or letting the dam collapse and flooding them as well. Now, reports said the CCP didn't even warn many of the downstream towns and cities before it opened these floodgates. Many people's homes were flooded in the middle of the night. There were reports of people, for example, not shutting off their electricity and being killed because of that. There were reports of people being killed in their sleep by the floods. And in addition to this, there is already serious flooding downstream from these heavy rains. And in many parts of China, local authorities have been forced to destroy dams and dikes to manage the floodwaters. And so in addition to the dam itself, they're already experiencing serious floods in many parts of China beneath this dam. Were something to happen with this dam in addition to this, it would mean massive disaster. And on that note, as we mentioned previously, there was a viral video released online in China which showed what a collapse of the dam would entail. This was interpreted by many who saw it as a warning from the CCP itself about the lack of integrity on the dam and possibly to prepare people for such a thing. Now, you might remember that video. It showed, for example, that if the dam were to break, how the waters would move downstream and how many cities and towns would be flooded, some completely submerged by these waters. Now, the quality and data believed to be used in the production of that video has many suspecting that it was actually an official CCP video. Now, whether or not that's true, we could not confirm. But we can say the video does appear to be pretty credible in terms of what it shows and in terms of the calculations of what a break in the dam would entail. Now, in other news, the BBC is reporting that a Chinese agent has exposed how he used LinkedIn to hunt for targets. Now, it's interesting this is coming out now. This is actually not a new issue. There were reports on this last year of the CCP using LinkedIn to basically find people to target. And I've reported on this before going back several years. The methodology is actually very simple. And on that note too, LinkedIn can be a pretty dangerous place when it comes to being exposed to targeting by foreign espionage. Here's how it typically works. If a Chinese agent wants to target a company, here's what it does. It gets a premium account with LinkedIn, it types in the company's name, and it maps the entire employment structure of that company. You can see every person who currently works there. You can also sometimes see former employees if they choose to list it. And what does it do then? Well, the agents go through these different individuals and find their other social media platforms. You can very quickly, for example, find out what their political views are, what their hobbies are, what their interests are. Some people may reveal other things. For example, are they having troubles in their marriages? Are they having financial troubles? Meaning, are they vulnerable to honey traps if their marriages aren't doing well? And are they vulnerable to, for example, bribes or business offers if they're in need of money? Can they be exploited, for example, through ideological means, appealing to the different political views? Or could they be exploited if, for example, they voice their unhappiness with the country itself? Now, one of the easiest ways the Chinese Communist Party would exploit a company would be using honey traps. I've reported on this previously. Now, different agents in different countries use this method. There was a pretty well-known report, for example, on a former Russian spy talking about this, and she said it simply like this. She said the idea is pretty simple. In some countries ask their men to lay down their lives for their countries. In Russia, women are asked to also lay down for their countries. Of course, being a reference to the method of honey traps. When it comes to the CCP targeting individuals, this can be pretty simple. Now, for example, the CCP wanted to access the data centers or the IT sectors of a company, which could give them access to broader parts of the company. The method would be very simple. It would type in the company's name on LinkedIn, it would find the IT workers for that company, and it would send a pretty girl to go and message them online and start a relationship. And from there, as the relationship would develop, they could get some access to the computers that would give them access to the systems. This is very, very simple, very basic espionage. But it's interesting now because news is now being exposed, at least publicly, that LinkedIn and different platforms are being exploited in these different manners. And in other news, moving back to China, Xi Jinping, the head of the Chinese Communist Party, may have sent a veiled message by making a visit to the Xiping Battle Memorial Hall. Now, Xi visited this memorial hall on July 22nd to pay tribute to the decisive battle in Xiping City that took place between 1947 and 1948 between the Chinese Communist Party and the nationalist Kuomintang, which later became the government of Taiwan. And now this took place during the Chinese Civil War, which led to the CCP taking over China. A report from the state-run CGTN news outlet said that Xi, quote, relived the history of the revolution and paid his respects to the revolutionary martyrs. Now, to win the battle against nationalist forces that were deeply entrenched in the city, the CCP employed every method at its disposal and finally resorted to using waves of civilians as human shields. Reports had said the bodies of civilians piled until the Kuomintang couldn't stand to fight. Then when that took place, the CCP soldiers moved in and seized the city. Now at this memorial, Xi said, according to RFA, that the, quote, new China didn't come easily. He said, quote, we must defend the great cause of socialism created by the Communist Party of China, and also said that the CCP should be passed on, quote, from generation to generation. Now, what does this mean? Pressure against the Chinese Communist Party is coming from other countries, from internal party factions, and from the Chinese people themselves. The CCP is under assault from all directions right now. Now, in context of this, when Xi made the statement that, quote, we must defend the great cause of socialism in relation to visiting this battle site, what is he saying? He's suggesting that there's a battle for the future of the CCP when it comes to its socialist system. He's saying we must defend the great cause of socialism. And what must it defend against? Well, again, the CCP is facing pressure from many different directions. When it comes to defending the cause of socialism, as he describes it, coming from external systems, well, we could interpret this, for example, as being wolf warrior diplomacy, where it's fighting back on every single front using the most aggressive diplomatic means it can. It is using tit-for-tat retaliation, for example, like closing the U.S. consulate in response to the U.S. closing the Chinese consulate. Like, for example, fighting back against Australia using the exact same wording when Australia warned against travel to China and that people could face arrest. It is talking about fighting within the CCP itself. We talked about Xi Jinping, for example, using the word of political security, being a reference again to internal party fighting against different political factions that would risk his own hold on power within the CCP. It could, for example, be the Chinese Communist Party fighting against pushback from the Chinese people themselves, for example, like we saw in Hong Kong, where people were protesting for democracy, and the CCP basically did a hostile takeover of Hong Kong, using regulation to effectively end Hong Kong's autonomy. It could be different methods, for example, to push back against what the CCP would regard as, for example, separatist movements, like in Tibet and Xinjiang, where you have the Muslim Uyghurs, and in Taiwan, which is technically a separate country, but which the CCP would regard as part of China. And when Xi talks, for example, about reliving the, quote, history of the revolution, what is he talking about? Reliving the history of the revolution. He's talking about reviving, very likely, these exact same measures and that exact same spirit. And this is concerning. Now, you might remember some of what we reported previously, that there are hardline factions within the CCP, some of which are pushing for pretty extreme measures when dealing with all these different forms of pressure. One of the proposals that is on the table, and there has been some reporting on it in China, is, for example, to basically close down China again. Close China's borders, basically backtrack everything that had been done under Deng Xiaoping, one of the former leaders of the CCP, who did the reforms and opening up of the CCP. In other words, closing down China from the rest of the world, closing its borders, locking things down, and basically holding a second cultural revolution to reestablish the power of the CCP. She is talking about reliving the history of revolution, and that has connotations within that. And also, this battle ties into the CCP's history of using any means it can to win. And this is especially relevant now the future of the party is on the line. Now, for example, in that battle, the Chinese Communist Party, when it was facing defeat, resorted to using civilians as human shields, waves of civilians as human shields. And in context of this, the Chinese Communist Party now would very likely also use any means necessary to keep its hold on power. Now, does that mean persecuting the Chinese people even more so? Well, they're showing signs of that already with different methods like, for example, the social credit system, with different abuses, for example, like what it's doing in Hong Kong, and with its different crackdowns on human rights in many parts of China. The CCP is becoming more authoritarian, not less authoritarian. When it comes to its external methods, for example, the CCP may also, say, up the ante when it comes to unrestricted warfare, using its different forms of unconventional warfare to even greater extents. And when it comes to, say, fighting the revolution within its own ranks, Xi Jinping is already again talking about different methodologies of political security. This could lead, for example, to purges within his own party. And now with that said, again, this is just my own analysis on this issue, and we'll have to see how things play out. With that said, of course, we'll be following this as it develops. Also, the Chinese regime is facing some pressure in Canada as it moves to buy an Arctic gold mine. Now, Chinese companies have already purchased some assets in northern Canada. For example, MMG Ltd, a Chinese state-owned company, already has zinc and copper minerals in the Arctic, and now it is lobbying the federal and local governments to provide funding channels for the construction of a 200-mile road and deep-water ports in the northwest region of the Arctic. Now, Chinese Communist Party state-owned company Jilin GN Nickel Industry Co. Ltd. also owns a copper-nickel mine in the northern tip of Quebec. And as polar ice is allegedly melting, global powers including the United States, Russia, and China are also in the Arctic Ocean is becoming a key transportation route which shortens travel between Asia and Europe. They call it the ultimate high ground. Although China's northernmost point is more than 900 miles from the Arctic Circle, it has declared itself a, quote, near Arctic country and has obtained observer status in the Arctic Council. Its members include the United States, Russia, Canada, Denmark, Finland, Iceland, and Norway, and Sweden, the country that has territory in the region. In 2018, the CCP issued a white paper on Arctic strategy, and this white paper proposed to establish a, quote, Polar Silk Road, or an Arctic Silk Road, and formally included it in the Belt and Road Initiative. And so again, when it comes to the Arctic, China and other countries regard the Arctic as being the ultimate high ground. It's an area that's not only valuable for potential maritime shipping and traffic, but also for potential building of military bases, because it would give the CCP direct access to, say, build military bases that could launch attacks against the United States if there were a wartime scenario. Russia has also been having territorial disputes with Canada in that area because of this. With that said, folks, we're again broadcasting Monday through Friday, 5 days a week, so be sure to tune in. And also, if you want to support this channel, we do have a Patreon, which you can find the link to in the description below. And also for our Patreon supporters, I do a live Q&A on Sundays. Also, if you haven't already, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps this channel grow. And if you want to go the extra mile, please tell a friend or family member about Crossroads. Now, with that said, folks, again, please take care of yourselves, stay healthy, and stay free.